which is a Skydance corporation, is also the parent company of CBS Sports, reached a landmark deal with TKO Holdings announced today as Paramount Plus will be the new exclusive home for the UFC starting in 2026. The biggest question, Dana, is why now? Why the change, and how did it all get done?
Well, our deal is expiring, so get out there, started shopping around, and this is where we ended up, and I love it. I love where this is headed. I love the idea of being on Paramount Plus. You know, when you think of these streaming services, live sports is so important because you have to tune in and watch it when it happens. And if you look at the moves they're making right now and the content that they just locked up South Park. Yet they have Yellowstone, Mobland, which is a big hit, Tulsa King, and the list goes on and on. So not only if you're a UFC fan, you get away from the pay-per-view model. Now you just pay, $12 or $13 a month, whatever it is, and you get all this other programming plus all the UFC content.
It's about damn time. It's about damn time. That is the best news I have heard in a very, very long time covering the fight game. Listen, for those of you who know, for those of you who follow this channel, those of you who are the loyal listeners, you know how much I complain about having to spend 85 plus taxes on damn cards. My goodness. On the numbered cards. 85 plus taxes. That's like $1,000 a year. Finally, the UFC has done something that I think is very beneficial to the fans and the UFC simultaneously. Now, before I continue, I have some thoughts. I have some reactions to a few things that Brendan Shaub said about this deal. But before we continue, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification button. Support this channel, guys. If you don't show up, I won't be able to do this. I'm not monetized. I do this because I have a passion for it. But I need you guys to show up. I need you guys to like the comment, like the videos, engage in the comment section, share, hit notification, subscribe. Let's get this cracking. Let's build this community and get it cracking. All right, so back to this news about the UFC signing this new deal, this new broadcast and distribution deal with Paramount Plus. Guys, I'm happy. I'm happy. First and foremost, as a streaming service, I'm actually pretty okay with the content that Paramount Plus has, because even though most of these streaming services do not make quality content anymore for the true cinephiles or the true fans of movies and TV shows, Paramount Plus still manages to put out some content that makes sense, whether that is Yellowstone, Tulsa King, all the shows that Dana has, talked about. So I like that. Paramount Plus as a streaming service is good enough to pay even if the UFC wasn't, even if the UFC didn't sign a deal with Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus to me is a good service, a good streaming service to have. But then you add the UFC, and I'm getting all the numbered cards, all the fight nights. Now, I don't know if I have access to some other UFC features, but for the fight nights and the numbered PPVs, we're no longer going to be paying 85 plus taxes. We just pay the monthly subscription fee for Paramount Plus. Can be more than $15, $20 max. And we have all the pay-per-views, and it's just going to be great. I love it. I'm going to save a lot of money on this. Now, Brendan Shaub, former heavyweight fighter of the UFC, he has the Thick Boy, and Extra Thick podcasts or channels on YouTube. Now, over the years, Brendan Shaub says a lot of crap. I know, listen, if I'm the dumb casual and I say a lot of crap, can you imagine what it's like for me to say someone else says a lot of crap? Yeah, that's how bad Brendan Shaub's crap is. But I've got to say, the past couple of weeks, I don't know what happened. Was Brendan Shaub mistaken? Brendan Shaub these days is beginning to make some sense. A lot of times now, a lot of things he said, particularly with his reaction to Renato Moicano rejecting the $200,000 settlement from the UFC, and Brendan Shaub's thoughts on this new deal, the $7.7 billion over 7 years broadcast deal with Paramount Plus at the UFC. Brendan Shaub's opinion on that was quite detailed. I listened to almost all 26 minutes of his video on this, and he made some very salient points. I mean, from a fan perspective, and he made some great points also from a fighter's perspective. But it's essentially saying that it might be a good deal for the UFC, but it's not necessarily a good deal for the fighters. And it's also not a good deal for the fans. So for the fighters, Brendan Shaub sort of implies that this new deal is not going to increase fighter pay, even though the UFC has doubled its revenue by signing this deal. I gotta say, I don't know about that. We don't know. We don't know if this is not going to favor the fighters or the fighter pay is not going to increase. And even if the UFC decides to increase for the champions by like say 5%, according to Brendan Shaub, it's still something. It's still something. We're never going to get massive fighter pays anyway, regardless of whatever structure or distribution deal the UFC has. Now, look at it this way, Brendan. In today's world, in 2025, you don't need to have supreme fighter pay to make money. You don't need to be the champion of the UFC to make money. You just don't. Rose Namajunas, no, not a good example. Let me, because Rose was already a champion. Let me use Sugar Sean O'Malley, and another good example would be Sugar Sean, Khamzat Chimaev. Sugar Sean O'Malley had a lot of money before he became the champion because of the gimmicks, the exposure, the social media presence. He didn't need the UFC as much to make as much money outside of the UFC. Does that make sense? Khamzat Chimaev, same thing. Khamzat is pretty rich. He doesn't really need UFC money at this point. Now, being the champion is going to make Khamzat get more money. Obviously, that's why most people aim for the belt. A lot of guys today's fighters, they don't care about legacy as much, right? They want to be champions because they really want to change their lives. It's not legacy. They say it's legacy, but it's not. That's some bullshit. I've seen it happen too many times. But my point is, outside of the UFC, even if the UFC doesn't give fighters as much money from this new deal, listen, to create yourself or your brand as a fighter, it's really up to you, the fighter. It's up to the kind of fights you perform, the kind of performances you have in the octagon. Really. If you come to the octagon and do something spectacular once, twice, maybe 3 times in a row, guess what? The UFC takes notice, and then the UFC will push you, which will give you bigger exposure, better social media presence, and you can still make money outside of the octagon. Because guess what? Fighters, what are fighters? How many times do fighters typically fight? On average, 3 times a year, right? Remove injuries, but they fight 3 times a year. They make, depending on what level of fighter or fame that you are, you make a certain amount of money 3 times a year, What happens to the other times in the year where you're not fighting? What happens to training camp? You know, where all that money is going to? It's going to, some of that money is going to go to training camp. It's going to go to your managers or your team, whatever. What happens in that period where you're not making money from the octagon? You have to make money elsewhere, right? So, as a fighter today, my advice to all fighters, when you get in that octagon, put out the best, most entertaining fight that you can. It will help build your following outside the octagon. And you can actually make money and provide for your family in 2025 outside of actual fighting. There are people who don't fight that still make a lot of money. So if you have a chance to be a spectacular fighter, people know you, your matches are great, guess what? You're still gonna make money, right? Brendan Shaub also mentioned, and I'll make this real quick so I can end the video and don't make it too long. Brendan Shaub also mentioned that the UFC doesn't make stars anymore. And with this guaranteed money getting into their purse over the next 7 years, they wouldn't be under the pressure to make superstars or make really good fights. Bruh, I understand that. But again, that to me is the responsibility of the fighter. Even if the UFC doesn't give you the exposure, right, or the push rather, if UFC doesn't give you the push, every chance you get that you can get into the octagon, you have to show out. It's not the UFC's responsibility to do that. The UFC's responsibility is to give you the platform. It's your job to get on that platform and shine. That's just how I see it, right? And as for whether or not the UFC is going to be, going to put out good fights, because they've been putting out some crappy fights in the last couple of months, right? Listen, nobody wants to run at a loss, right? If the viewership doesn't go up, guess what? Over time, Paramount or any other person who wants to be a broadcasting partner to the UFC probably wouldn't jump on distribution for the UFC fights if viewership starts to go down. And viewership will go down if the UFC doesn't put up good fights. So that puts pressure on the UFC to give us good fights regardless of the deal that they have with Paramount, because if you have attained a certain level, if you've gotten to the top, the hardest part is staying at the top or breaking that ceiling. Because the UFC, listen, if they lose the fans, it's a wrap. And there's still enough guys in the UFC, there's still enough guys in the roster, and there could still be new guys coming down the line who can actually move the needle. An example would be Ilia Topuria. Guys, a year and a half ago, we were not talking about Ilia Topuria. Right now, if Ilia is about to have a fight, guess what happens? We're all tuning in. Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. These are all stars. I'm sorry, these are superstars. Khamzat Chimaev. These are all superstars. So fighters, it's up to you, man. I'm happy as a fan. I get to save a lot of money because of this deal. I get to have access to a lot of UFC content without paying, coming out the pocket for that much money. Come on, it's a deal for me. I don't know about you. But I encourage people to look at Brendan Shaub's, go watch Brendan Shaub's analysis and breakdown. It was very insightful, if I'm being honest. And I'll leave the link in the description. You guys have fun. Mr. TDC is out on this one. I'll see you guys later. Peace.